Would Pastor Ann Grandel with Love Inc. please come forward for the invocation?
Father, despite the challenges we have been facing, we are so grateful for this amazing nation and beautiful community you have given us. We ask you to give each of these elected leaders and the city staff wisdom, clarity, and insight for the decisions they are facing. As season winds down, we ask that you refresh and strengthen them. Protect them and their families, for only you know the sacrifices they make in order to serve us. Unify our nation and our community. Help us to be respectful of each other and to work together for peace and prosperity, which we pray glorifies you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Fred Forbes, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge of allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Here.
Councilman DeWitt?
Here.
Councilwoman Carr?
Here.
Mayor Simmons?
here.
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn?
Here.
Councilman Gibson? Councilman Forbes?
Here.
And
Thank you. Can we have a motion from someone on council?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
And that would be to allow Mayor Simmons to participate via telephone. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes.
Councilman Gibson is on his way. He'll be here
Oh,
shortly.
okay, fine. Pete, it's good to have you on the phone.
Everybody.
Yeah, public comments on agenda items. Anyone?
Good evening, Jude Richvale from Old Bonita. I'd like to comment on the stormwater utility issue today. I think we need a stormwater utility. We need a utility to channel away floodwater, but we're kind of aiming that floodwater in the wrong direction. That floodwater, as it stands now, is going into the Gulf or tidal estuaries with all the fertilizer that's laden, with all the pesticides, with all the herbicides. That water, as our population increases, will only increase our red tide. So I think we need to rethink this solution. We need to think about channeling all that stormwater to a different place. And I think the most appropriate place would be to BSU, where it could be cleaned up and reused as irrigation water. I want to read a short paragraph here from National Geographic. Roughly 20 million algal cells color the swath of red that recently lingered off of Florida's southwest coast. The red tide began in October 2017, and there are no signs that the toxic plume will lift anytime soon. I bring your attention to the date, October 2017, just a month after the major hurricane we had here, the major flooding. That's what really was the primary cause of all that red tide for such a long time. Yes, Lake Okeechobee contributes to that, it does, but so do we. And we have to take a serious look at ourselves and what we're doing to cause that red tide right here in Bonita. And I know it's going to cost a lot of money to do what I'm proposing, to rechannel all that water to BSU to be cleaned, but we don't have another choice. If we want to live without beaches, if we want to live with a dwindling economy and bad health, then we don't have to do anything. But if we want to really conquer this problem, we have to start here. And that means channeling that water to BSU. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Bob Mulhare. I'm a vice president, planning consultant with Hol Montez, which is a local civil engineering and planning firm. I'm representing an applicant for a comprehensive plan amendment which has been submitted as under review. I won't talk about the specifics of that. But we are interested in the presentation that you will have tonight in a little while by Dr. Banyan. And we didn't really have anything to review in advance, so I don't have any comments. We'll watch the presentation, but if there is something substantive in that affects the people that I represent, I'd like to let you know that we'd appreciate the opportunity to respond, if not tonight, maybe to digest that information and then respond. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Kathy.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, Kathy McGrath. Just a brief comment on, under the consent agenda, item G, approving the caretaker's agreement for Nature Place. As you all know, I was involved with the Friends before the city took it over. Jason Zaccarino is the best thing that ever happened to Nature Place, so it's a no-brainer. Let him stay, please. He's a gem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Candace Woodworth, and I'm an assistant planner with Morris DePue Associates in Fort Myers. And I'm here representing our client, the owners of Bonita Grand Mine. I'm here to provide comments on agenda item 7D, the presentation to the City Council regarding the state-mandated and optional evaluation and appraisal report-based amendments to the comprehensive plan. We acknowledge the opportunity that was provided for the public to ask questions from noon today to 4:30 p.m., as well as the workshops to be held tomorrow night at Bonita Springs High School. However, again, no published materials have been provided with the agenda packet or distributed separately for members of the public that cannot attend these meetings to review and consider. We would respectfully request that tonight's presentation, as well as any supporting materials for tomorrow's workshop and the future amendments, be published and distributed publicly for all city residents and business owners to review and consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dawn Konsikowski, and I have delivered information to everybody on agenda item 7D, and I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory of the process we went through from 2015 to 2017. I went through the COP plan and copied the wording that now exists and reiterated the concerns we had 3 years ago and we still have today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else? Public comment on agenda items? Hey, Ben.
Ben Hershenson, Fairwinds Homeowners Association. It's interesting. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but there's always something that triggers something in the stormwater management. Whatever the solution is, wherever the water goes, here, there, or somewhere, we need a stormwater utility to pay for it. That's the whole idea. No one has specific ideas right now, but we don't have the money to do much of anything. So I would hope, I hope the people of this city, when the time comes, and the city council, to reiterate what I've said in the past. We need a stormwater utility. We need the money to do what needs to be done. The specifics will be determined some other time, but I just wanted to reiterate my support for this stormwater utility. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. We're on to consent agenda. Council, anything you'd like to pull?
Move the agenda.
Roll call.
Councilwoman Caramba? Aye. Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
All right, thank you. If we can ask.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment
Yeah,
on consent agenda D. I just want to commend staff for using the state bid on that.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot on that. I think it's you can see the difference in it, so good job.
Good, thank you. Can we ask the group from Azanta to come up, please? So, is a big year for Zonta International. It is actually the 100th year of the organization, founded in Buffalo, New York, 100 years ago. And in Bonita, it's as big a deal, a quarter century for the Bonita Estero Zonta Club. So I'd like to read this proclamation. Zonta Day, April the 19th, 2019. Whereas Zonta has made a difference since 1919, working around the world to improve lives of women through global service and advocacy efforts to ensure the safety, education, health care, and overall economic sufficiency of women throughout the world. And whereas the Zonta Club of Bonita Springs, Inc. was chartered in 1994, is part of Zonta District 11, Area 6, Club 1482, and is celebrating 25 years of service to the Bonita Springs Estero community and 100 years as an international organization. And whereas Zonta Club of Bonita Springs is an organization of business and professional women dedicated to improving the circumstances of women in all stages of life, locally and globally. And whereas the Zonta Club has awarded one woman each year since 1998 as Woman of the Year, this woman portrays what Zonta's mission is all about and recognizes that woman at a special luncheon in her honor. And whereas the city of Bonita Springs is proud to have such dedicated women in our community who unselfishly give their time, energy, and resources to help those less fortunate, lifting them up emotionally, spiritually, and giving hope. Now therefore, I, Peter Simmons, Mayor of the City of Bonita Springs, declare April 19th, 2019 as Zonta Day in the City of Bonita Springs. Would you like to say something?
Well, a lot was said in the proclamation, but I will add that Zonta International, we have 29,000 members in 63 countries. Our chapter has 29 members. Globally, Zonta spearheads different projects such as saying no to violence against women and ending early childhood marriages. Locally, we are very proud for the projects that we do. We support groups such as ACT, Meals of Hope, Partners for Breast Cancer. We collect feminine hygiene items and donate them to the Bonita Assistance Center and Interfaith Charities because these products are not covered by food stamps. We also give scholarships out to female students and women returning to school to better themselves through education. And these, all these projects are funded by our annual Woman of the Year fundraising luncheon, which is April 16th at Palmyra. And we do have seats available if you're interested in coming, and also honoring our Woman of the Year, who is Sally Smith, a Rotarian, who has given back to our community and has projects in Guatemala. We'd love to have you at our event. And again, yes, we are celebrating 100 years for Zonta International and 25 years for our chapter. We're very proud of ourselves. Thank you very much for the recognition.
Karen, well, thank you all so much.
Okay, one more time.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thanks for your effort.
Okay, we have a presentation by Nick Bedos, who was first mayor of Estero and is council member there, along with Bill Spikowski with Spikowski Planning Associates on potential new county rules that would allow new lime rock mines to be more easily approved in the county DRGR adjacent to the village of Estero, and to discuss potential statement of support of the efforts of the village of Estero. Let me just say that we know that Mayor Ribble reached out to Mayor Simmons about this, and we had a letter on that. And Nick and I've been talking to Nick as well as Bill with respect to this. So, thanks for being here, Nick.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. For the record, Nick Betos, representing the village of Estero. I'm here today to ask Bonita Springs to join Estero in attempting to prevent the proposed county comprehensive plan amendments. I will go over how we got here and what we are asking of you, and Bill Spakowski will go over the report we engaged him to produce. In 1990, the state and county established the DRGR, which put special protections on 85,000 acres of environmentally sensitive land and limited residential development to one home for every 10 acres of uplands and one home for every 20 acres of wetlands. In addition, it added protections for the quality of water and for flood protection. In 2008, the county produced the most comprehensive study and plan for the DRGR, the Dover Coal Report, which included an area restricting mining to the Alico corridor, except if more lime rock was needed. This included map 14, which showed where mines could be built and where they could not be built. It also created a method for determining if more limestone was needed, which would be reevaluated every 7 years. In 2016, the county contracted with Walthrop to produce a report which found we needed more limestone than the existing mines were able to produce. 2018, Cicada Seed Company had another report produced, the Stewart Report, which came up with much different results. After reading both those reports and considering how important the DRGR was to Lee County, I requested that Estero engage a consultant, which turned out to be Bill Spagowski, to do a peer review of the Walthrop and Stewart reports. Bill was one of the primary planners of the original Dover Coal Report and is extremely knowledgeable in the DRGR. Based on the Spakowski report, we believe that the county is eliminating the protections on the DRGR using inaccurate data and assumptions, and thus we strongly feel they should not move ahead with their proposed amendments. We are asking you to join us in asking the Board of County Commissioners to stop the comprehensive plan changes, and by joining us possibly in 2 weeks to express our positions, hopefully a joint position, to the commissioners at their April 17th meeting. I'll now ask Bill to come up and to go over the findings of the report.
Thanks, Nick. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, and good evening. The map that's over here, basically, I want to just make sure you understand the magnitude of the changes that are being proposed. Is the remote control? So the Lee County's DRGR is shown in green, and of course, when you incorporated a part of that and made that as part of your city. The rest of it remains, and you can see the relative scale of Village of Estero and Bonita Springs. In 2008, the areas that are shown hatched here were either already being mined or were approved for mining, or were very nearby areas where mining was likely to be approved in the future. This was basically the area that was going to be enough to provide enough mining for about 25 or 30 more years. When Lee County put a map like this into its comprehensive plan in an effort to make sure that the mining continues to take place along Alico Road, where basically it's pretty torn up environmentally and traffic and everything else, rather than spreading it around. When they adopted that map, they actually added a bunch more land. So The areas in blue at the top were added back then, and the two areas marked Troyer and Old Corkscrew Plantation have not yet been approved, but they are in the process now, in the zoning process with Lee County. So the magnitude of this just really almost dwarfs the size of your communities. This is not, small scale. These are international companies, very big business. In your backup material, I see that you've gotten a copy of the peer review that I performed for the Village of Estero regarding the two studies done that Councilman Betos has just mentioned. There's a lot of technical information in there, but what I want to talk about tonight is just 3 points in that comparison, because I think those 3 points really make the most important differences that would explain why one group said there's not enough mining through the year 240, and one said there's enough mining through 2050 or 2060. I mean, these are big differences, and these 3 differences I'll talk about really account for those differing conclusions. The Stewart report, which was done not for Lee County, but done by a landowner, a farming company that's right next to one of the proposed mines and is actively opposing that mine, in this peer review, I've commented on the shortcomings and good things about both studies, and also at the same time critique a lot of my own work from 10 years ago, because we've all learned a lot since then. The Stewart study, despite the comments I made about it, really is far more an accurate depiction, and here are the reasons why. They not only looked at all the mines in Lee County, which is basically Lee County creates the majority of lime rock that's used in the 7-county region, but Lee County is not the only source. The Stewart report included analysis of all the mines, all the lime rock mines in Collier County, of which there are quite a few, and very large ones, in addition to those in Lee County, and also the lime rock mines in Charlotte County. So altogether, there's a great deal more lime rock being produced in our region, for our region, than just those in Lee County. And by not analyzing those in their full capacity, the Waldrop study didn't take into account that and somehow assumed that we need to provide the rock for everybody. Even though we do provide a lot of it because we happen to be centrally located and have good quality rock, we don't provide all of it. So that's the first reason. The second reason I need to explain it in pictures as well as in words. This picture, if you were to go in the area where mining's taking place and just take a slice into the earth 100 feet deep and look at it sideways, that's what you're looking at here. This is sideways look. The top of the picture is ground surface, and the top layer, the first 15, 20, 25 feet down is shown here as sand. It has some rock mixed in, but it's primarily sand. Water sinks in pretty easily, although it's generally wet most of the year. And about 20 or 25 feet in the DRGR, that sand gives way to rock. Now, it's not a solid piece of rock like this picture suggests. It's fairly solid, but there's a lot of cracks, and water actually moves in through this rock. Not as much as moves through the sand, but it moves through the rock. So the rock layer and the sand layer are the shallow aquifer, one of the places we get our drinking water from. Below the rock is a layer of clay, and water doesn't move through the clay, so that sort of separates the surface aquifer from the aquifers below. The clay layer has no value to the mining companies. It has a lot of value to the public, separating the aquifers. So what we're talking about is what happens above the clay layer. So when miners go in and dig, they have to dig through the sand, and they sell that as fill dirt. So if you have a concrete blockhouse elevated a few feet, this is where you get your fill dirt. But they're actually looking for the rock below, and then they go not quite all the way to the clay, because they don't want to dig up any clay. The clay is real bad for them. It contaminates the rock. But they go pretty deep near there. So when you see the mine pit when it's done, it looks just like a big lake. But in fact, it's a little more complicated. It's not water all the way down. When you get to the bottom of the pit, there's a layer of rock that's been broken apart with explosives, the explosives that are needed to break the main rock layer up so they can dig it out. A lot of that falls back in and can't be produced. They don't want to go back in and get it because they're going to grab some clay at the same time. So there's a fair amount in the range of 20% or so that stays at the bottom. The reason I'm explaining that is when you try and determine how much rock these mines will be able to produce, you have to understand that the fill dirt, they're producing it, but it's not a big deal. It's not a big profit center. There's other places you can get fill dirt. It's a layer of rock that they're actually able to get out and break into gravel, riprap, all the different products that goes into make concrete and asphalt and drain fields and roads and everything else. So the point of all this is that in computing how much the existing mines has still capacity they still have, you're only looking at the section marked lime rock aggregate. You're not counting the part at the bottom. The wall drop report basically, though, took another 20% out of that, even though the 20% was already sitting in the bottom of the lake and had already been excluded. So that made it look like the existing mines won't produce as much as they do. The Stewart report used actually a simpler method. They took the entire thickness of the lime rock layer and deducted 20%. And that's a little low, but it's actually closer to being accurate than the wall drop report. The third point is not about how much rock you're getting, but about how much lime rock you need. Now, what this graph shows, going across the bottom of the graph, those are years and 5 years increment, 5-year increments starting from 2020 going out to 2040. And the little red dots are basically the number of additional residents we're expecting in the 7-county region that is being supplied from this area. So you can see that each 5 years, the number of new people is less. So although we're still growing quickly, we're growing less quickly than we have in the past. And these are the official state projections upon which we build our entire road network and our water plants and our sewer plants. And they're not perfect, but they're really quite reliable. So, the point of this is that when you determine how much lime rock you need, it's primarily related to the amount of new people coming, because they need houses and stores to shop at, and the roads need to be wider, and the new subdivisions have streets made of rock. So the amount of rock that's needed in the future probably will be a little bit less each year because the growth is less. So that's an important factor. However, the wall drop report, and duplicated by the Stewart report amazingly, was basing the amount of rock in the future not on how many people are coming in and have to be accommodated by new homes and shops and roads, but by the blue line at the top, which is the combination of all the people who are already here, already have a home. The roads, the streets have already been paved in front of their houses, and then adding in all the new people. And so basically, the method that was used by wall drop and by Stewart assumes that the amount we need goes up at that fairly steep pitch every year. When you add that much year after year after year, going out 20 years, you're really saying you're going to need a lot more than you're really going to need. So it's a combination of these three factors that led to the really vastly different conclusions. The fact is that the county has really been very generous to mining. It's actually a sort of burdensome activity. A lot of communities don't want any mining anywhere near them. Lee County's always been pretty good about, this is a good place for a lot of good material here. And you know, we get our sand and our vegetables from somebody else, and they get our rock from us, and you know, we're not trying to build a little island. But on the other hand, we don't need to provide an excessive amount. We don't have to be the only supplier of the region. And when you create analyses and conclude that we need more mining or we won't be able to have building materials based on erroneous data, this is a huge mistake. And the county, after getting this report, is basically now wanting to get rid of the rules that said lime rock mining is going to be in an area that's already mostly industrial, and it's going to be in an amount that's about a 20-year supply. It seems like a long time, but it takes a long time to get a mine up and running, so that's not an unreasonable amount. But they want to get rid of all the planning that says that's how we're going to decide when more mines are needed, when there's a real need, and not just because somebody who owns a piece of land out here, you know, wants to get approved for a mine so they can sell that to a mining company. So it's really unfortunate the way this is happening, and it's happening at an incredibly rapid clip. Especially compared to the couple of years we spent in 2008 to 2010 with, you know, many dozens of public meetings and experts from all different disciplines and large citizens committees in order to come up with how much mining we need and how also to protect all the other land uses out in the DRGR, wildlife, water supply, agriculture, and the residential communities out there. It's all being, the biggest part of it's being tossed out almost overnight. In a way that really defies, you know, good planning or good sense of stewardship of our future. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have it, but this is the bigger picture of the whole report. Thank you.
Council, any questions for Bill?
I don't really have a question, but I sort of been monitoring this development over, this didn't just happen, there always been a discussion before, and I'm curious about how any of these plans would affect, we have a mine in Bonita Springs that is coming at the end of its allowable time, how would that impact any of our decision to either renew their contract or not? Would it affect an existing mine? It's just
It really
for new
affects the unincorporated area mining,
unincorporated.
and the unincorporated
Yeah.
area only has no effect on you and the mine in your area.
And then could you just review again, because there's been some, quote, clarification coming out of Lee County commissioners, both on the radio and in something that was distributed today or a couple of days ago, questions and answers. The removal of that, the map 4, was it? Or
14.
14. How important is that?
I think it's really, really
Mhm.
critical. Without a map that is designed to allow enough mining but not too much, when somebody comes in to rezone a mine, there is basically nothing to measure it against. Obviously, the proponent's going to say, we need it badly. We wouldn't be investing this money if the need were there. But the county, and I'm talking about not just the current commission, but future commissions, will have no ability to determine if that's true or not if they take away the map that is based on maintaining a 20-year supply.
Does that actually locate the area where any future mine should be? Is that in the
Yes,
map also?
that's what MAP does. It identifies the area
So
within
that's
which
how you
mines can
keep
be
it
approved. Yes.
concentrated in an
Yes.
area that is, as you said, already industrial, rather than putting it in the DRGR.
The area that's already established is in the DRGR, but it keeps it from going further into the DRGR in areas that are really pristine at this point. I don't know, am I doing that, or?
No,
Okay.
no.
I think it's,
It's coming
phone.
from our mayor.
Okay.
They're strangling him there, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, that map is really essential. Without that, when a rezoning case comes in, the commissioners will have no idea. They'll hear the applicant say we need it, and they'll hear the neighbors say we don't need it, and they won't have any real ability to know which is really the case.
Anyone else?
And you're asking about the comments that the county posted. It's really, I don't know, outlandish, doesn't even begin to describe it. They actually say the second sentence of what they posted today, the proposed changes do not allow for expansion of the area in which mining can occur. I mean, I don't even know how you could say that. You're taking away the map that controls the expansion. How could you
Yeah.
possibly say it doesn't have the effect of doing exactly what its purpose is? It just defies my understanding of language.
Well, thank you, because when I did look at that and I said, this doesn't sound right to me, but I wasn't as informed as you are, but thank you for commenting on that.
I'd like just to add one comment to that. I think it's an interesting use of the English language that the county commissioners are doing in that website that they've set up. What they're saying is that it's not creating any additional land for mining. Well, in a way, if they had the right to expand it in the future, they had that right, but it had to go through a whole process. Now there'll be no process. And as long as you have a commission that wants to allow this to happen, which I think we've seen the development of the DRGR over the last 3 or 4 years, it's whatever we have looked at as a protection for our environment, for our quality of life, is being taken away from us. And we're going to have no say in it whatsoever.
Well, I know, I feel that Bonita's is sort of at the end of the funnel, and that funnel starts in the northeast, it goes southwest, and we're in the southwest, so I am very sensitive to anything that's going out in that area that's outside of our community, because we don't have as much control over our own we have a little bit of control over the one that's within our own city limits, but not outside of that.
I think that's the reason why
Yeah.
those of us that were here in 2008, 2010, when the Dover Coal Report was completed and adopted, were so thankful, because that was then, it put into writing the protections that the DRGR in 1990 was supposed to give it to us. But this put it in writing and specified exactly what could be done and couldn't be done. And now that report, they spent about $1.6 million at that time, Bill? And that was as comprehensive a report as you could get. They went back to all the other reports and extensive reports, looking at what's there now. And it was a great planning tool, but it's just being thrown out.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good job.
Yeah.
Fred?
Bill, isn't it true that once they start to do the gravel mining, either when they decide they're not making enough money out of it, or when it's emptied out, all they can get, it automatically becomes a proposed development?
It's not automatic, but that is
Close
usually
to
what
it.
happens. I mean, in some cases, like the Harborage, it's now a development off US 41 around a rock mine, and Lee County bought Lakes Park. That was a rock mine. But generally, it's lakefront lots after the mining. There's a zoning change, a few things that have to take place, which is why I say it's not automatic.
And there really is no big rush. They could wait 2 or 3 more years to make this decision,
Perhaps 5 or 10 more years, yes.
and then get another study done that's even better than the first 2.
One of the criticisms the county makes in this document, which is not all wrong, is that the Lee plan doesn't describe the methodology for the study, and it does not. But it could, and the comprehensive plan could have the methodology, or it could be adopted by ordinance. So they're saying because the methodology is not clear, we should throw the whole thing out, which is pretty strange.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
No.
Bill, can you it was in your report, but give us an indication of where 14 is and then what the change is physically?
So where map 14 is?
Yeah,
Let
we
me-
had a map up
let me see
there
if I can go
before.
back
You might have
here.
had it.
Map 14 looks mostly like that. It does not include the mine in Bonita because that's in your area.
You mean the
map
hashed
14.
area?
Right, the hashed area. It's the hashed areas here is very close. So this includes the existing and approved mines and areas around those that are not already residential or preserve areas.
So if they get rid of map 14, what's the area that would be eligible, more readily eligible for mining?
Well, anywhere in green that's not already in preserve. So like Edison Farms has been bought by the county, and there's
Right.
a 4 or 6 square mile preserve area that the airport has built as mitigation land, so that's publicly land. It
Right.
has to be kept that way. So, and the Audubon Society owns a lot, and
Right,
conservation.
right.
But everything else within the green area, if somebody owns
So it's
the land.
basically the entire DRGR other than what you talked about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, one last
Fred.
question. Let's assume this goes forward. Let's go 2 ways. If the map stays intact, I know they started out with, 70,000 or whatever number of acres. What are we down to now that's left? And then how much more will we be down to after this thing would go through?
I don't recall the numbers. Map 14 is a very large area. I mean, it really was, the one we originally proposed was supposed to be enough for 20 years, and then as you go through the process, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the county added another 1,000 acres at the end. So it's actually really oversized already. It's not that expansion is needed, but it's not beyond imagining that at some point it might need to be increased. But certainly no time soon.
Right, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anybody like to make a motion in support of the Village of Estero on this?
So move.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carroma?
Aye.
Thank you. I did take a shot, not to be presumptuous, at a letter that would be addressed to Mayor Ribble, and I don't know if, I guess it was handed out, maybe it's too quick, but if anybody had any comments, they could make it now, or else just give them to Arlene later, and we can forward the letter. We good? All right.
Mr.
Well,
O'Flynn, I
next-
want to thank you very much for having us.
Yes.
And for your support, and we hopefully will see you on the 17th with our attempts to convince the county commissioners.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
All right.
We have a meeting, unfortunately.
So there's a bit of housekeeping with respect to that. The county commission normally meets on Tuesday, but their meeting with respect to this item is on the Wednesday, which is when we have our meeting. And I'm wondering if it would be okay with council to move our meeting to the night at 5:30 on that Wednesday.
That'd work for me better, because I wasn't gonna be here.
Okay,
Flying
all
at
right,
2:30.
fine. And that would give us the opportunity to support our friends up there in the meeting in Fort Myers with our colleagues at Lee County. Is that all right?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So we need a motion?
You need a motion?
moved.
So
Second.
moved, second. All right. Pauline, you good?
I think we're good. We're just going to double check to make sure anything that's advertised will be.
I think it's only a week, right?
Yeah, but I
All
don't think
right.
nothing's been advertised yet, so.
We had a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Corumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
May I
Yes.
make an add-on? Could we organize some kind of activism here, if, just find out who is going to go and maybe get some prepared statements going, and so that we don't all say the same thing?
Yeah.
Is that possible? Could you organize that,
We can
please?
send out email first and find
Mhm.
out if you can respond to staff, whether you'll be able to
Mhm.
attend, and then we'll work on, you'll help provide us some
Pauline can
comments.
come up with that.
Okay,
All right,
thank
fine.
you.
Thank you. We know this is not a staff initiative, but she can
No,
assist
but
us with
she-
respect to it. Yeah.
She's going to coordinate it,
All
so,
right.
because we can't talk to you or
Thank
anyone
you.
else.
Thank you. Okay, now we have a stormwater utility update from our friends at Stantec.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is part of our monthly process of providing you updates of where we are in the process. At this point, this evening, we are not asking for any decisions from council. It's just an update on how the evaluation process is moving forward, and preparing of where we might see where certain credits might be applied to nonprofits in the future, and also looking at how we want to analyze the equivalency unit rates as well, the ERUs. So they're going to go forward a little bit further in more detail, the methodology for that process.
Hello, Tim.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman O'Flynn, other members of the City Council, Tim Hancock with Stantec, and we're here really just to provide an update. As Ms. Hunter said, we're not going to be seeking any action on your part. Certainly, if you have any questions, we're happy to address those, but we did promise that as we kind of proceed through things and drill down a little further and a little further, we would just keep peeling the onion and keep you up to speed as much as we can. So that is the purpose of tonight's presentation. And so we're going to review the fees, go into the credit system, then we're going to give you, and Councilwoman Corumba, I think this was a conversation we had, really look at some sample properties. What does this type of property look like? How would the fee to apply to this versus that? So I think that's going to help answer some questions, not just for you, obviously, but also for the public that's both in attendance and monitoring this as well. And then, of course, lastly, we'll review the schedule with you. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. David Hyder, the technical meat for tonight's sandwich, and then I will follow up with the schedule items at the end.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. We're going to keep it brief this evening. Not too many slides, but we do want to dive into a little bit more of the details. And first off, just talking about the fee structure, there's been some discussion in the past and just some clarification that we want to provide in terms of how does this fee structure actually look and what categories do we have. So there's really three categories of properties that we're looking at here. And I want to clarify and emphasize how each of these would be charged. So the first is a residential property with a single owner, and that would be 1 ERU. So again, an ERU is our billing unit. If the fee is $50 a year, 1 ERU, it would be $50 for that property. This category of property would be any property that has a single owner and a single parcel. So this would include townhomes. They, in the property appraiser's data, are single owners on single parcels. The second category would be residential properties with multiple owners, and that's essentially condominiums. As we've talked about before, we're recommending that they be set at 0.4 ERUs, so 0.4 of the $50 if that was what was selected. This would include all condos, and in the property appraiser's data, these are identified as stacked parcels. So multiple owners on an individual parcel. And that provides significant clarity there in terms of the differences between those two categories of residential properties. I do want to mention that there is an option, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes what it would look like if we selected this option, to charge the condos based on their actual impervious. So you could say, what's the actual impervious for the entire condo complex, divide that by the number of units in the condo complex, and come up with a fee under that structure. We're recommending the 0.4 for administrative simplicity because the average condo unit is around that 0.4. Believe that that makes sense. And then non-residential properties, we've talked about this before, they would be billed based upon their actual impervious as multiples of ERUs. So what this looks like, again, single family properties, any property, single owner, single parcel would be 1 ERU. The average impervious that we found on those parcels is 4,500 square feet. So that's the definition of our ERU. If you're a condominium, it would be 0.4 ERUs. The average there we found was 1,800 square feet per condo unit when you divide it out for the impervious. And then for non-residential, again, we're recommending it be based on actual impervious surface because while the average is 46,000, there's a tremendous range when you get into non-residential parcels based on the type of development. So next off, just again, nothing's changing here. These are the fees that we've come up with for the 3 funding levels. We have operating cost. To fund that, it would be $26 per year per ERU. To fund the capital repair and replacement, that would be $9. To fund the potential capital would be $15. The summation of that is $50 per year. Again, you could pick any combination of funding for those. But that's an important segue into the credits. And so now I'm going to talk about credits and then we'll dive into some property examples. And I know there's been some confusion about the credits and how they're calculated, so hopefully I can step through this in a logical manner for you here. But again, the idea with a credit is that the credit is designed to recognize on-site or off-site stormwater management. So if you have a permitted stormwater system, you're reducing the cost to the city in that local system because you're managing stormwater runoff. And so when we look at the system as a whole, there's really 2 categories of expenditures that we've identified. We have the system-wide expenditures, which is at the beginning here on the table, which we would define as the baseline cost. So these would be things like regulatory requirements, management of the system, capital, basically anything that's outside of the neighborhoods that everybody benefits from. Allows you to drive on the streets, allows you to get to your property. That's the baseline cost. Regardless of what anybody does in their neighborhood or an HOA or COA, you're going to bear those costs. And those costs, as we've identified here, is be about 50% of your operating cost, $430,000, all of the capital maintenance, and all of the potential capital. So those components, we would argue that you can't credit against those because those are system-wide, they benefit everybody. The local system, the non-baseline operating costs, are those that are in communities, catch basin cleaning, pond maintenance, local line cleaning, things of that sort. And that's the balance. That's about 50% of your operating cost. And those would be impacted by management of stormwater. And so that's the pool of dollars essentially that we're crediting against. So if you have a permitted system and you discharge completely outside of the city system, we're arguing that you could get a 50% credit against the operating portion of the fee. We're not changing the methodology here. I'm just trying to explain it in a little bit more clarity. And I think as we show some of the examples, it will become a little bit more clear. So the way that this would work in general is if we have an HOA that has a permitted system, but they do discharge into the city system, we're recommending that they would get a 15% credit, and that would be credit would be applied to the operating portion of the fee. If you have a stormwater management system that exceeds the permit requirements, which is to retain a 25-year storm, let's say you retain a 100-year storm, so you essentially have no impact on the system, you could get up to that 50% of those local costs would be mitigated. Or if you directly discharge outside of the city, you'd get that 50%. And then as we've talked about before, Florida law requires that you exempt agricultural parcels if they have an MPDS permit or environmental resource permit. So as we move forward, here's just a very simple example, just showing for a single family home that's in an HOA that has a permitted system. You can see the fees that are there per ERU. The credit would be applied to the operating portion, 15%. So it would reduce the fee down to $22 for the operating portion. Again, no credit on the backbone system capital for R&R or the potential capital. If you're a single family home with a permitted system that discharges outside of the city, you would get that 15% credit. So that would reduce the 26 down to 13. And then again, we wouldn't credit against the capital components. So that's an overview of the credits. And now I'm going to show you some examples. So these are properties in Bonita. This first property, again, is a residential property. It's defined as a single-family residential property per the property appraiser. It's a single home on a single parcel. Has 3,500 square feet of impervious. Again, we're proposing for single-family homes that we use 1 ERU. And so simply you can see it'd be 1 times 26, and you can see what the fees would be there, $9 for the R&R and then 15 for the potential capital. This home is located in an HOA that has a permitted system, so they would get a 15% credit on the $26 or the operating portion. Another property, bigger property, also in an HOA, 6,500 square feet of impervious surface. They would pay the same because we are using the average for single family properties, all 1 ERU. So then if we look at some condominiums, this is a condominium property. It's got 258,000 square feet of impervious. There's 124 units. So when you do the math there, you get about a little bit over 2,000 square feet of impervious per unit. And so in the table here, we're showing what it would be under our recommended approach of the 0.4. So if you use the 0.4 ERUs for all units, it would be 1040 per unit in the condo complex for operating, 360 for capital, and then $6 for the potential capital. This community does have a permitted system, but it does discharge within the city, and so they would get the 15% credit per unit on the operating component. Then another example here, another condominium property, a little bit smaller. It's got 178,000 square feet of impervious. There's 96 units. Comes out to be right at our average, 1860 in terms of square feet impervious. And so the difference here, depending upon the approach, is very minimal. But this community has a permitted system, and it also discharges outside of the city system. So the credit would be 50% on the operating portion. So $5.33 for the operating portion. Again, that's the fee per year, per condo unit. And then one more condo complex. This is the largest one that we have, 385,000 square feet of impervious, 360 condo units. So this one actually comes on the smaller side in terms of the impervious per unit. So they would benefit if you were to use the actual measured impervious. So instead of the 0.4, it would be 0.24 ERUs per unit. And then this one, they do have a permitted system, but we're still examining. It looks like they discharge outside of the city system, so it'd probably be the 50% credit, but this is one that we needed to examine a little bit more. And then I have 2 more examples, and then we will wrap up. So a small non-residential property. The majority of this property is impervious. You can see it's 28,000 square feet of impervious. That turns into 6.2 ERUs. So it'd be the 6.2 times the fees. So the annual fees here for this property, 161, 55, and 93. And then one of the larger non-residential properties in the city. You have almost 500,000 square feet of impervious. Again, most of the property is impervious. This property generates a tremendous amount of runoff because of the size and the amount of impervious. Equates to almost 108 ERUs. And so you can see what the fee would be, $2,800 for the operating and then for each of the various components. So those are all the examples. I'm going to have Tim come back up and talk about our schedule, and then we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. In addition to all of the public engagement work that we've done and the public information meetings, this council has taken 2 actions so far just to simply keep the process moving forward. There are 2 key dates as we look ahead. The next will be August 2nd. other than the monthly updates, which I know you tremendously look forward to. But beyond that, August 2nd will be the public notice that would go out to property owners advising them of what the assessments would be. And what we've learned in other communities is that that type of letter needs to be less regulatory in nature and more descriptive in nature. That's very helpful to the residents, and we think it can be written in a human voice instead of a regulatory one. So we highly recommend doing that. Then September 15th is when you would actually, at a public hearing, move to either adopt the ad valorem assessment and at what level you may fund it if you choose to go forward. So those are the two dates going forward that are key to look at. And we will continue to provide you these types of updates, keeping them as brief as possible at each of these meetings. But more importantly, we want to make sure as we go forward that you and the public are equally informed of each step as we kind of narrow this down, how it applies, and then, of course, answer any questions you may have. And with that, I will conclude our presentation for this evening.
Thanks, Tim. Council, any questions about the presentation? Okay.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you. Next, we have a presentation to City Council by Dr. Margaret Banyan with FGCU regarding the state-mandated and optional evaluation and appraisal report year-based amendments to the comp plan. Arlene?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening we have Dr. Banyan here with us to go a little bit of a recap of where we were over a year ago in the process and how we've come along, and to provide some feedback on how the process will move. At the conclusion, there's going to be a recommendation of whether we'd like to move forward with the state-mandated changes and optional amendments at the same time, whether you'd like to separate those, and a hybrid as to whether you'd like to move forward with the state mandated and just the transportation element. And so we'll be looking for some direction from you all on that. But tonight is not to dissect the actual potential elements or options. This is an overview of the process.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back,
Good
Dr.
evening.
Banyan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody. So, like Arlene said, I did want to just give you an update on the process and kind of frame some of the decisions. We're looking for direction from you. This is a new clicker, so I don't know how to work it. We'll give it a shot.
Hopefully this one works.
I would like to also introduce the rest of our team. So this is Shelley Johnson with Insight,
Shelley's back.
and Rose Marie Fusco, and she's also with Insight. So I hope you will be seeing both of them a lot. Rose Marie is a new face in the planning arena here in Lake County. So we're pleased to have her on board. So I also want to talk about the previous amendment history, just as a reminder, and then discuss what we think as we stand, what the remaining tasks are, and then finally talk about some different options for moving forward. So as you sometimes will remember, we completed the EAR in 2016, so that was the evaluation and appraisal review. And that process really was to look at the whole comprehensive plan to see what potentially could be changed if you wanted. There was 3 buckets of changes, as you might recall. One bucket was state-required changes, the other was related to annexation, and the last was optional amendments. We then were given a year by the state to complete the state required amendments. We did those in 2017. Initially, we had planned to phase in some additional state required amendments. But it turns out we were not able to do that. And so we, at this point, there's additional state required amendments that are due before you can process additional comprehensive plan changes. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But then there's the annexation related and optional amendments also remaining, and there's no due date for those. And that's been consistent all along. There's not been a due date there. So I had emailed you a table, and this was just all of the policies kind of as a placeholder. And in this table that you got in the email was just our working draft of policies that were in some of those buckets. We weren't really ready to have a substantive conversation about those. And the reason for that is because, as you remember, we never really got to have a conversation with you or the LPA about what was in the optional amendment bucket. We did the state required, and at that point we stopped, so we never really had a chance to go back and revisit those. So those are really just placeholders to continue that discussion or not in those different areas. At that time, we had a conversation with you about continuing on with the first three elements of the comprehensive plan. That was the future land use element, the transportation element, and the housing element, because those are tied together in ways that are unique from the others. So at this point, we think there's still three buckets of changes that were on the table. And the first was state required. We know that we're going to have to deal with the coastal high hazard map, and we know that we're going to have to somehow deal with concurrency related to transportation. And there's a few other fixes that are relatively minor. We have to update acreage in 1 or 2 land use categories. So that's what we need to do with the state required. And we can talk a little bit about kind of the strategy there if you'd like later. Then in the second bucket is anything related to annexation. So when you annexed certain properties, they were not brought into a city's future land use category at that time. So when you do that, if you choose to do that, it's not required by the state, but if you do choose to do that, then some of the acreages will have to be updated in those land use categories that receive those properties. And that will also affect the future land use map. And so when I say the last bullet point of other related goals, objectives, and policies, when you bring in the annexed properties, we have to look to make sure it's consistent with the acreage and just do a quick review. And then the last bucket, the optional amendments. So that was where we had talked with you about doing the first three elements of the comp plan. With that, we would look at the future land use element and the map series. Many of the maps in that future land use element are very out of date. We know that some of them should be updated. And again, it's not required by the state that you have updated maps, but there are new ones that should be in the comp plan. And then the second element there is the transportation element and the map series that goes with the transportation element. So again, same thing, many of the maps in the transportation element are out of date. So the direction we had gotten from you is to make sure that those are updated. And the last is the housing element. That's a fairly short element, but the direction we had gotten was to really look more into workforce housing. And we had conversations early about how sometimes when you have people traveling from long distances because they can't afford to live here, it impacts your traffic, and then it impacts your land use. So that's why we think those three elements are tied together. And then the last in the optional is other related goals, objectives, and policies. And we would just do a quick review to make sure that the rest of the comp plan wasn't out of sync if we made some revisions to those first three elements. So that is what we think our remaining tasks are. And we've developed a few options for how you might choose to move forward, and you can we can have a discussion about what some of this means. And the first one is, right now, we have been given direction to make the changes to the state required as well as optional. And so your option would be to process all the amendments on the same timeline, keep that process during season, and conclude the process of around spring 2020. That's kind of the current budget that we have and the current contract that we have, and you're welcome to amend that if you would like. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is the direction that we've gotten from council previously is to make amendments during season. And so that kind of keeps all of these optional amendments and the state required amendments happening when residents are here. Option 2, we know again that we have to deal with the state required amendments. So option 2 would be to split those, to do the state required amendments only and complete them by fall of 2019, which we can do, and then tackle the optional amendments after that point and conclude those spring of 2020. There are budgetary implications, though, and the reason for that is because by splitting the amendments, we would have to redo all of the LPA meetings, all the council meetings, all the transmittal documents. So there is some additional cost that we would have to bear if we split those two processes. Then the third is kind of a hybrid approach, and the hybrid approach really is to process the state required amendments along with the transportation element, because the transportation element and concurrency go together. So we wouldn't want to have to rewrite the concurrency language over again. And if we did those both at the same time, we could conclude those by fall and then process the rest of the optional amendments in spring. And by doing that, it would just avoid us from having to rewrite the concurrency language. So there's still budgetary implications, just not quite as significant. I think, Fred, I see you have a question burning.
Yeah.
But it's opportune because that's the slide we're on, and that's kind of the last set of comments.
I think, and maybe that's in it, and it didn't come out. You do the state required, you do those transportation ones you said, but the comp plan recognizing annexations needs to be in this first thing, I think. Is it?
I've spoken with external counsel about this. It does not appear that the state requires you to do anything with annexation or annexed lands.
That's not what I said.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood the
No,
question.
I'm saying, I think we want to be in a position to do those sooner than later. But I'll defer to the esteemed city council.
Well, and so the issue is, we have, and there are probably some representatives here, we have several petitions regarding, or at least two that I can think of, regarding properties that are under the old Lee County plans, that when we move forward with annexation the annexation plan amendments, we do not want to be staging these things so that we're dealing with this is the only option. So what we've internally discussed is the possibility of having a switch over to only Bonita. So basically taking the existing DRGR comprehensive plan amendments and basically making it a Bonita DRGR, while also concurrently processing the applicant property owner driven applications. That way we would have both options come to the council at the same time, so that we don't get to a situation where, let's say we drive with the applicant-driven process because they've already prepared it, it comes forward, gets revised, denied, or anything else, and then we're forced to start from the drawing board to move forward the annexation. We would get, everyone would have the equal opportunity, and the council would be able to decide as a policy matter.
Not do it twice.
Yes,
Right.
that's
Okay.
the idea.
But
And that's fair to the applicant, it's fair to the city to move things along quickly.
So that's, even though we split this up in two packages, we may end up with this other thing going not either as late as the optional, but not as early as the fall.
Not as early as the fall.
Right.
Because we cannot process any other applications. We couldn't process the property owner-driven applications until we complete the state mandate.
Right. Okay.
But we would line it up so that we'd be ready to go right afterwards.
Got it.
Anyone else, Council?
Yeah,
Mike?
why would we separate them? What's the benefit of
separating versus doing all of them in the spring?
So as, how do I go back here?
That's the new system, you can't go back.
I don't know how to go back. So I'm looking for slide 5. So, as council had said, if we wait and process them all together, all of the private initiated amendments can't move forward
Until the state's.
until the state required ones.
We're unable to process any other changes unless the state amendments are in place.
Okay, and so what's the budgetary implications, dollar-wise?
If we split,
Yeah.
I would have to go through and do another budget through the university. So it's roughly, if we do option 2, it's roughly $30,000, 20 to 30,000, because
And-
we're having to redo.
And 3?
And 3, it's roughly about 15 to 20,000.
More over 2? Or?
No, 3 is cheaper than 2. So
Okay.
3 is total about 15 to 20,000 or so. And 2 is more expensive because we would have to be rewriting the concurrency language. We would write the concurrency language in option 2 and then have to turn around and rewrite it.
3 would get what we want, so we can process others sooner.
Right.
And it's cheaper.
Right.
The other issue with 3 is that it provides us the opportunity to get the language that we needed for certain grant applications we're going after for multimodal pathways, because that's part of the transportation updates we'd be looking at.
So 3 should be the top
3,
choice.
the hybrid.
Yes.
I feel it. Anybody else? Greg?
No, I agree. I think
All
it's 3. The other thing is, I mean, I know we like to wait it for the season, but if it doesn't fall that way, we voted on things
Right.
that we're not waiting for season on anyway, so I mean.
Anybody like to make a motion for 3?
So
I make
Second.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba. Aye. Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
So from that, Dr. Banyan will be getting the staff an update on the cost, and we'll provide that back to you as well. And then we'll be working on, in the future, setting individual meetings with council members to go over each of these elements and dissecting each of how we're going to move forward in the process.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That
Margaret,
additional
great to see you.
the additional budget, budgetary cost will be in next year's budget. Or are we gonna have to pull it out of?
No, we should,
I think
No,
it's,
no, we should be fine within this year's budget for
Okay.
option 3 as we move forward, because you're talking about splitting out into 2020.
Well, that's
with
what I
the
mean,
optional.
the,
So we should be fine.
the new budget, the 15 to 20,000 will be in next year's
Correct.
budget.
Correct.
I would have to, that's a little bit too much for my brain right now. Arlene knows the answer.
We should be fine with what we have.
It's cool, that's all right, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret, thank you, and pleasure to see you both as well. Okay, mayor and council member items. Discuss an invitation to join the American Flood Coalition, Mayor Peter Simmons. Arlene, did you want to, I don't know if Peter can hear me,
I've
or?
asked Arlene to tee this up, everybody.
Sure. So the mayor received an invitation from the mayor of Coral Gables for us to have the opportunity to participate in the American Flood Coalition. We have determined that there is no additional cost to the city for participating in the program. It provides more access to opportunities for information nationwide. Additionally, we were encouraged to participate from a representative of Francis Rooney's office as well.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other comment? Roll call, please.
Deputy Mayor Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Thank you all. All right, first reading of an ordinance. Is this for you, Derek?
This is my big moment to shine.
No public comment? All right.
This is a zoning ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request by American Pet Resort LLC to rezone approximately 1.55 acres from neighborhood commercial district and light industrial to commercial plan development. located at 8725 and 8739 Commerce Drive, Bonita Springs, Florida, 34134, providing for an effective date.
Hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Any comment? Roll call, please.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Corumba. Aye. Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Flynn.
Aye. Thank you, council. First reading of the following ordinance, public comment allowed. Mr.
Okay.
Rooney.
An ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, amending the provisions of the recovery of professional fees and costs for the review of development applications and procedures thereof, providing for conflicts, providing for severability clause, providing for an effective date. As you'll recall, this is bringing back the item that was on the last agenda. It's still the first reading. We did talk, I did speak with most of the council members to get some of their concerns, went back with staff, looked at the numbers. What it turned out is we had, I think, 26 or 27 applications in which we actually took fees on, where there was a decision made that additional deposits were required. Of those, only 6 ever exceeded the actual amount of the deposit. So the $2,000 deposit went up front, only 6 applications went above that. In 3 of those applications, we actually refunded some of the money because there was a dispute as to how much should have been borne by the applicant or whether it should have been borne at all. The vast majority, almost half of all the money collected was refunded back to the applicants. I had a lot of good ideas from the council members, and so what I've kind of come back with was 4 thoughts to throw out to you to look for some policy direction and whether we go forward with this or make changes. The first was a question that was brought up at the last meeting, is whether it is appropriate for us to pass on these costs while we're going through these planning changes and obviously some very complex applications, or whether it's something that should be borne by the city. The thought on that from a staff perspective is we are going through a lot of changes. Our comp plan just got approved. We're going to be developing land development regulations. We have visioning studies. We have a couple things that are in process. But as we've been going through these processes, the reviews have been getting faster and more efficient because people know what to expect. We're going to continue to have a little bit of that going along with DPZ studies and with the zoning board's recommendations, but we expect over time that we'll use this avenue a little bit less often. The second item that came up, and I think is a good one, was to what extent, because this proposal would be citywide, so we wouldn't have questions about where this would apply. Would it apply to every level of development, including single family? And so I think that actually a single family house exemption would be appropriate. I can see where there may be opportunities where we would need to engage other people, but I think that's such a small issue that it should be something that the city bears the cost of. One consideration was given to how to make sure that people who are utilizing, or this process being utilized, that there's some certainty on the behalf of the applicant that this is not going to be just an unending well that we keep asking for additional money for the review. One recommendation was when we looked at where those applications that went above the $2,000 deposit, how much above did they go? And most of them went between $300 and $500. So what we're suggesting is maybe we move the deposit amount up to $2,500, and that is a cap. So if above that cap we have additional reviews, that would be something borne by the city, but so it wouldn't be an unending issue. It would just be a $2,500 deposit. They would still be entitled to refunds if, as the majority have been, those services aren't utilized. And then the other item that we discussed was either monthly or quarterly reports on how much we're utilizing these services, outside services, and then possibly even bringing back the whole idea of whether we continue to have the cost recovery at the conclusion of all of our planning initiatives. So when we're done with it, did we use this process? Should we continue to use this process, or should it just be retired? So those were the discussion points. I think they were all valid and should be considered.
Council?
I'd like to make a motion, we go to the $2,500, raise it to that level, and then have at least quarterly review, and then afterwards, after it's all said, after DPZ and all the studies have got done and we've got the standards there, then to review it and maybe to sunset it.
And exempt the houses.
Yeah, exempt single family.
Second.
So all the recommendations?
Yes.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any other discussion here? Roll call, please.
Councilman Fort,
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba. Aye. Councilman DeWitt,
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Simmons,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Okay, I will make those changes, and this will be coming back in May. For
Okay.
s-
We're having a meeting in April 17th at 5:30.
Yeah, okay, we'll be able to get it on for the April meeting.
Okay, fine. Good work, Derek. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, public comment on any city-related matter. John Dolmer? No? Oh, no. Okay. Yes, on any city-related matter.
Thank you very much. For the record, Kathy McGrath. One quick comment. I guess I didn't read the consent agenda. I'm so glad to see that we took one step forward on, this is on the Wonder Gardens Cafe, to bring it to comply with ADA requirements. As I remember, I think you all remember, there was some pretty interesting proposals of people wanting to move in there, so that's a good step forward. And of course, you all know I don't participate in any social media, so you are my Facebook. First of all, of course, celebrate Bonita this Saturday.
Yes.
Don't forget it. This is the celebration of the birthday of the incorporation of our city. And we have a wonderful day planned in our beautiful downtown Riverside Park. Our entertainment is High Voltage and Sarah Hadika. Lots of fun stuff for the kids, face painting, train rides. We have food vendors and other vendors, and we have a few new ones. You're going to be surprised and enjoy it, so please, you all come out and enjoy it. And secondly, I left the newspaper article at home, but I think you remember most of it. I was very happy to read that South Florida Water Management received funds, and they're going to be clearing, and there were a lot of rivers and waterways mentioned in Lee County. The ones we're interested in is Keel Canal, Imperial River, Spring Creek, and Oak Creek. And it's very, very much, and I think they're working on Mulek Creek now, and if you know anybody that lived in Island Park, they had severe flooding.
They did.
But if you take a ride on either Pennsylvania or Kentucky, take a look at the bridge at Oak Creek. I don't know how anyone's getting through there, so that was really, really good news. Happy to see that. And of course, I want to talk about the Bonita Film Fest. It's only April 3rd, but the galas are in November. And there's a very, very nice article in the latest issue of Spotlight, page 37. And we've made a few changes this year. You know, we have received more and more entries from young filmmakers. And I mean, these are 16 and under, and they are awesome. And so we decided that we're going to split the galas because, as you know, they became pretty lengthy. So we're going to have the regular adult gala it's always the first Thursday in November. It's the 7th of November, starts at 6 o'clock. And then we're going to have the one on Saturday, the 9th, starting at 10 o'clock. And they're going to have their own gala with the same thing that we have for the adults. And Antonio has promised a collage of 30 seconds. This is in both events, 30 seconds of every qualified entry submitted. And then, of course, the winners will be shown in their entirety. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So look at this article now. He just updated the website. And of course, I had it written down. I left it at home. I think I can remember it. It's http://BonitaSpringsFilmFestival.com. And it has all the information. So all you filmmakers, whether you're 16 and under or 16 and over, put in your submissions. We look forward to seeing it. It's a fun day. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else? Seeing none? City Attorney?
I have nothing. I will be out of town for the next 2 days. I'm going up to Washington, D.C. Carsley's in charge, and Bert Saunders is available by phone if you need anything.
All right. Thank you, Derek. City Manager?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have before you, just for informational purposes, in light of our needing to reschedule our first CIP budget meeting, we wanted to provide you with just a brief outline of how we've laid out the CIP. We're not asking for decisions this evening, but if you would entertain us, Matt does have a couple items he did want to go over specifically on multi-use paths and sidewalks, just to show you the direction we're going with the CIP. The fact that we're putting this on the record in front of council, that opens the opportunity for future CDBG grant opportunities, as well as any other grant opportunities that come forward. We wanted to be able to present this so that it's been an item presented to council.
Good evening, Matt Feeney for the record, Assistant City Manager. What I have here is a map of the, I'm just going to start with a simple map of the multi-use paths and then show a map of the sidewalks. What is colored, what's different from the map you saw before back in November is we have included the low to moderate income areas throughout the city, which is colored here in the pink color, which is where CBDG funds are eligible for funding projects. And I really want to call your attention to the inset area here. Recently, City Council has authorized us to look at design services for Pine Avenue, as well as conceptual design to cross the railroad for Cochrane and Pauling. Right. And so that work has just really started in the multi-use path arena, but it lends itself, and we're always looking for areas where we can spend the CBDG dollars in this vein. It opens us up to another project here along Bonita Drive that has been identified in our bike ped master plan and really would link up, particularly if Pauling Lane becomes a feasible project with the railroad. So that might be something for us to keep in consideration for staff. We might be looking to go into a design phase fairly soon with that project with the assistance of CBDG. It is in an eligible area. It is a highly trafficked corridor. There are no pedestrian facilities along it currently. And if the railroad accepts a concept that makes this connection, or even this one for that matter, it provides a natural connection for the kids that are using the rec center and the Little League fields and the pool, as well as the middle school, to safely walk through that corridor. Another opportunity, I just had a meeting today with the West Terry Street designers. We're getting to very close to 100% plan on that project.
Wow. All right.
There's a gap. We did leave a gap right here, right? Which is kind of the miracle mile, so to speak. It's not a mile, but
it's tight.
It's tight. It's a tight right of way, but you'll end up with a finished pathway project with the West Terry Street project right here. And you'll have this gap. We've done a lot of work last summer on the railroad to improve that crossing, to try and ease that. But it might be another area that we would ask you to look or consider using those CBDG funds to do some design work and be able to have a complete connectivity through the railroad corridor and on into the downtown project.
You think you can connect through there? I mean, that's the issue.
I think it'll take creativity. We've looked at it, more closely. We've been out there. My folks have been out there, on the ground since with the railroad crossing work quite a bit. I've been out there. I think there's a path forward. I wouldn't say that it'll be easy, but I think it's something that we need to consider. It may not be fully contiguous in the same exact vein as what we're able to build further to the west, because there is more right of way, but it would still provide an important connection and kind of finish that out. So that's kind of where we are with the multi-use paths. I do want to point out, Logan Boulevard's multi-use path will be constructed. It's roughed in already, so that project's moving along. So that mile is being built. The developer over here along Old 41 hasn't started on the pathway, but they will be building as part of their development here where the old Causeway lumber site is, stretch a 12-foot wide multi-use path. So that may be another area in the future that we'll be looking towards.
Council?
Just a quick question on the CBG money. Do we have enough to do all three projects, or are we really concentrating on one versus the other? Are we going to, in the future, near future, are we going to have to pick a priority?
Right now,
Or can we do 2 of the 3?
I think it would depend on the design fees. There's also follow-on costs, to take these two to final design, assuming the railroad comes forward. But I think that the short answer is, design-wise, you probably could do 2 of the 3, if not 3 of the 3. It will just depend on what the costs are. I haven't solicited costs for the 2 that I mentioned, but I think it would be close.
We'd
And
probably
then
be looking at a cost share with the CDBG. The CDBG is going to cover, what Matt's saying, the majority of all the design fees, and then there'll be some that will have to come out of our CIP for the pathways. But this would help get us into a better timing with CDBG, where we could actually start designing some of these and actually have them on the shelf ready to go for when the grant program is there. Then we can start building them.
Okay. And
I
on
guess
the,
sorry, Greg.
oh, I was just going to say, on the Pauline and Bonita Drive, we're going to have to do some purchasing of land to go across where the auto parts store, or not the auto parts, but the auto store, and what is it, where the overflow for Buffalo Chips is.
We show an existing right-of-way.
Yeah, we
through
have
there,
a right-of-way.
roadway right-of-way. Cochrane was similar.
Just a railroad.
Prior to my arrival, the city actually just improved an existing right-of-way, and that's what we show there at Pauling.
All the way to Old 41.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the great thing about it. We got the easement in it. It's more than an easement, it's our right-of-way. Huh? One thing on this is, so those two, Pauling and Cochrane, about Derek use of impact fee funds, because that's like brand new connections. So, not for tonight, but yeah.
So
Anybody
if
else?
it's a general consensus of council that these are proper direction for us to move forward, then we would be implementing that in our work plan with CDBG.
Do we have a consensus?
I think so.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I've got another slide for sidewalks.
Oh.
Bear
okay.
with me. I've got to kind of format them. I send them as PDFs.
Right.
As he sets up for that,
What's he gonna do, move the map?
I'll just review. So the process in which we laid out the CIP, you'll notice, is we followed our strategic priorities. So we start with number 1 strategic priority to improve stormwater management, and then we move to our second strategic priority, transportation, and number 4, environmental protection, and number 5, community aesthetics. Number 7, government transparency, and then you'll see that the final items are other capital expenditures, and this is our take of working with Councilman DeWitt's advice that we look at how we can pre-plan some of these larger scale improvements that have to be done as far as city hall improvements, city facilities, so that we're not having to take the hit in 1 year of a roof that's failing. We're going to try to put money aside each time and this is our way, and that includes the vehicles as well, so we're putting those plans into place for that. If you do notice that in the column that says next 5 years, fiscal year 2024 through 2025 and beyond, those do not affect our financial planning, and we are using those as policy placeholders. So if there's something that the council feels more strongly about that we should be pre-planning for, that we may not be able to plan any funds in this fiscal year, we're putting placeholders there. So we'd like to get some feedback on those. Those were just the ones that we identified from the priorities presented to us.
So just to repeat, we don't need to identify funding with respect to those. So
Correct.
that's in effect the wish list, or whatever we want to call it.
Correct.
So it makes a little sense to put stuff in there.
Correct, and then if an opportunity presents itself,
Right.
we can come forward if we have to do a match program, or we can move a certain amount of those monies forward in future years, but it's to be able to lay out a roadmap of where we want to be going.
So these, we talked last November, I think it was November, about sidewalks as well. Corridors that really don't lend themselves to multi-use paths. I think we probably talked more at length about the sidewalks than we did the multi-use paths. But these are areas we were asked to look at what maybe made sense in terms of where we had shelf plans and packaging projects to move forward to construction, as well as grouping projects basically for a future work plan, so that we could develop kind of a systematic approach to moving towards, design it in the current year, have it on the shelf for potential grant opportunities or for implementation in follow-on years. So we already have two sidewalks that are fully designed. One is Cockle Shell down here to Shangri-La Road, and the other is a really small piece of West Terry Street out in front of the fire station that connects to an intersection that goes over to the shopping center there. Council directed probably in early December to move to soliciting design for Maddox Lane, which
that's all done.
The designer is under contract.
Oh, okay.
We did meet with them prior to Christmas and walked through, or the holidays, walked through the project. So we do
Right.
have a designer under contract. They'll be coordinating with our folks, and we'll end up probably with a full set of plans, probably by budget time this year.
Okay.
So, given that fact, really, this kind of completes the corridor. It seems logical that if you move to a construction project, this shape that's A would really be your first area to move towards for construction. Because
Those three.
These three.
Right.
Because you have these two already designed. You'd roll this into the bid package. It completes this kind of neighborhood sidewalk network. It actually creates the loop I'm making there. And this is just, kind of an outlier that we already have on the shelf. Actually, this will complement the work that's going to go on with West Terry as
Mike,
well.
I know you've been advocating for that one on Terry, and I'm all for it, except I don't totally understand. So it's on the south side, and it's basically from coming out to the bus stop, is that?
The bus stop, and it's also a necessary piece to get a crosswalk at that light there.
Right.
There's a lot of people that go between those two bus stops and,
Right.
go from the apartments that are over on the south side to get to Publix.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that walk across there and there's no crosswalk.
No crosswalk.
And without that sidewalk to guide them over to the light where we could put a crosswalk,
Right.
they're just cutting across the median right in front of the firehouse.
Okay.
Just the other night, there was somebody going across. It was dark and you could barely see them going across, so.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Anything else?
I couldn't have said that better.
Yeah.
So, in future things that we'd probably ask council to consider, we do get a lot of requests, and this is a corridor that is walked quite a bit. I think there's the American Legions in this area. There's 7-Eleven. We have a nice east-west sidewalk network along Tarpon that kind of gets used in a recreational sense. This is a dark corridor. It does have some drainage issues that would be wrapped into a sidewalk project, but over the years we've seen a need. 7 is just really a kind of a linking between existing networks. It's so geographically it seems if you would consider B, or if you would consider 6, which is forgive me, I can't remember the road's name, but if you considered that network, which kind of gives you another kind of completed network area here between Bonita Beach Road.
Imperial Shores Boulevard.
Yep.
Imperial Shore, thank you. Imperial Shores Boulevard. It would give you, and this is Imperial River Road then, right? Yeah. Came back to me. So it would give you a nice linkage. We really kind of see this as a simpler sidewalk project and really one that could move in terms of cost and in terms of need and desired need or expressed need, a simple place to go. Another area, that we identified probably for the following year or 2 years out is this area C, which is along Wisconsin and Carolina Street. I will say that this is where we have petitions for and against sidewalks, so it is a little more complicated in that matter. It is a little longer segment, and it would have definitely along Wisconsin would have more of a drainage component to it because there are deep swales through that corridor. It would link up and provide a similar connection to what we have along Kentucky
And
Street.
both of those, each of those petitions have a lot of names on them.
Yes, yes, they do. So, I think that would be something that maybe you would need more. Maybe not so much push button, that you would need. Maybe a public outreach component. Maybe the designer would have to hold some workshops, or at least a neighborhood workshop to really vet out what is the desired interest there. D is along the city's portion of Beaumont Road, probably named after Beaumont, Texas. We do get requests for this. They're actually, where the sidewalk begins on Beaumont is where the city's maintenance ends, and it becomes a private roadway. So folks do walk there. So that is another area where we have received through the years requests. So worthy consideration. E is along Burnwood Parkway. That's where we just did the railroad crossing improvement, as well as the buffered bike lanes. So, it does have a buffered bike lane facility, which is a pretty robust facility. Not that it's a sidewalk, but that might be an area for consideration. F is really kind of in the MPO pipeline. I think the city, this is for safe routes to school. It was nominated last year. It's nominated again by the MPO as the #1 project. I think that's really probably an appropriate funding source to continue to pursue and really not have to spend a lot of city effort.
That's the one we have $1 million in funding.
No, the ones that I took those off,
took
but
those
they're
off. Same area.
they're east-west, and they're connective to basically to that road.
So you're talking about going north-south, is that what you're saying?
Yes. But I think that that in the MPO hand is really, instead of spending city dollars to go. And then G and H, we're doing a drainage project along a portion of G right now. G has a lot of folks that move through it. It's Goodwin Street, G for Goodwin Street.
Right.
It probably has some right-of-way concerns, and to build an appropriate facility, this is another area we've spent a lot of time in recently, myself and my team. You might need right-of-way, or really probably need to look at some road reconstruction to be able to narrow the lanes, maybe shift the center line to get yourself the room. I'm pointing that out because I think that it has a high need, but I think it will also be a high expense, and will take some real consideration when you look at what the available right-of-way width is and how the road's been constructed through that corridor. It may require right-of-way, or at a minimum, it may require kind of a road rebuilding project. H is Longfellow Lane, which we added out of the workshop. It's another one where the rights of way are not as robust as you may think. So it may take some more thought and more.
I thought the whole south side of Longfellow looks like.
It does not.
Not as much as you think.
Not as much as you think.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are. My recommendation, we're not asking for direction, but as you think about this, is really to probably look at the higher letter number, or the lower letter numbers, B, C, and D, to think for the following years, and think about the things I described in the level of difficulty with the other projects.
Council?
I just got a couple. In light of what happened in Cape Coral, can we get with the school board and anything that's going to a school or where it has a bus stop, concentrate on that? Because I would hate to have the incident that happened in Cape Coral with that little girl. If it's a sidewalk and, I know the school board's going to start looking at things. I know the Cape is looking at all bus stops in their area for lighting and for safety reasons. And I think where that incident happened, there was no sidewalks, no benches, little to no light. Okay. So my point is if it's on the way to a school or near a bus stop, I know you've got a lot of work on your hands, but let's concentrate or at least look at that, and maybe put that as a little bit higher priority than like I know Beaumont or even Longfellow in my district is very, very high on the priority list, or looks like it, but if it's going to a school or if there's a bus stop near, at least let's concentrate on that, even if it is a sidewalk that goes nowhere, like in front of Station 25.
Sure.
At least we can get something there get the kids out of the area.
Absolutely. So. Yep. Anyone else? Matt, thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah,
really.
you.
Sure. Thank you.
And your whole group.
If there's a general consensus on this, we'll move forward with this map as
absolutely.
well.
Okay. Anything else, Harleen?
We will at the next meeting be providing, staff has been asked by Lee County staff whether we intend to continue to participate with the Human Services contract for them to initiate our CDBG program. So next meeting, we'll have a draft letter from myself to the county staff that will have you review for the program.
Okay.
And then Dr. Banyan mentioned, we do have our workshop tomorrow evening at Bonita Springs High School.
Thank you. Mayor and council member reports. Amy? Okay. Greg?
Just the only thing, just to let you guys know that, speaking of the high school, I was there last last Thursday, to present Sheriff Carmine Marcino appreciation from the outreach committee. So it went very well. Myself, our city manager was there. I think it went very well. Very well received by everybody. The sheriff was very grateful. The outreach committee did a very good job, and the high school principal and everybody was there, and I think very well received. Good job.
Thanks. Laura?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Mike, yeah. I had a few things. Arlene and I met with Eric Draper last Friday. He's the head of the Florida Parks Department, and we're just talking about the conversation about our relationship, the city's relationship with respect to Lover's Key State Park, and whether we can work something out there. It was a good meeting, I thought, right? Also, they are advocates for Trail Town designations. And Mike, I don't know if you've seen any of this, but there are various cities, municipalities around the state that are kind of bike trail towns designations, and it kind of helps the profile, and I thought it would make sense that they're not really going to cost us anything to look into that. That makes sense for council? Yeah. So, and maybe I don't know, would you want to do that at the bike walk committee, or?
Yeah, we could bring it up then.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's a questionnaire and such, but, I mean, we're doing a lot of work, so it would make sense to get that designation, I think. So,
Yeah, if you could send it to Sean, that way we can bring it up at the meeting.
All right, fine. We did have the dedication of the sculpture over at River Park, which was a delightful event. It was with the students from University of Montevallo, and if you haven't had a chance to go look, it's really well done. So thanks to Nigel and the whole, and Jackie Hauserman particularly, and the whole Art and Public Places Board. Amy?
Can I just react to that? Because
Sure.
I did, thank you for attending that,
Right.
and I was sorry that I was away. But after looking at some of the photos from it, I wonder if we could, maybe Laura, I don't know who would do this, would get together like a collage of the different photos with some description about the individual pieces that were presented. You know, we could, I could bring it to the Art and Public Places. I don't know who should be doing this, but just like a little, 30-second, a minute video of just reviewing all those things, so that we could market it a little bit better,
And I know Antonio was present and did a video at the dedication, but maybe we can even do a side video of that and
Yeah,
clip it
I
a
mean,
little bit.
more than the dedication, but just to feature the whole,
The artists.
the artists themselves
Yeah.
and the products themselves. Kind of an art tour, so to speak, of the ones that are there, but featuring the art. I know there was some pictures of the names of the artists, but I couldn't figure out from the download that we got from Antonio which names went with which pieces. And if we could have some feedback from the artists themselves of what they were trying to portray with the presentations.
I mentioned a similar concept to Nigel,
Mhm.
which was, remember we were there, and each one of the artists went and they stood by their own sculptor. And I know I went around and asked them, in other words, what were you thinking here? What was your vision and such? I don't know if it costs much, but I think that's similar to what Amy's saying,
Yeah.
really. That would be, and maybe Nigel, the Art and Public Works, could
Yeah.
interview. Maybe they can do a Skype or something, each one of these young students. And, that might be something interesting for people to watch.
Actually, an oral history,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
an oral discussion, like you had a conversation, but, we weren't there. I mean, I wasn't there. but it's not so much the ribbon cutting, but just actually the focus on the art that
I
we're
agree.
going to have there.
We can talk to Laura
Yeah,
and Tony.
whatever ideas, and I could, anything that comes out, I can bring at the Art of Public Places whenever our next meeting is. I don't know when it is, but.
Also, Fred and I went to Tallahassee. I went for Pete, and we had a good series of meetings over the 2 days. And I think, Arlene, unless you check me on this, in summary, in the House, Ray Rodriguez has a bill in. So we have asked for $750,000 for our project. He has a bill in that is a placeholder. That's a good thing for 450, and there is the possibility for that to go up. Is the way that works. And Greg, you probably better understand this than anybody. And on the Senate side, there is not an appropriation ask in, but Senator Pasadomo seems pretty well tuned in to what Representative Rodriguez is doing, and is giving every indication she'll be supportive on the Senate side. Is that fair
Correct,
summary?
yes, correct.
Yeah. Greg, anything, does that
No, I
seem to make
think that's-
sense?
I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was.
Okay.
And also, we're working, I know it was distributed to you all, a white paper on our financial state and effects of Hurricane Irma. Our finance department's looked at it, Matt's looking at it, and we should have a final draft ready to send out by tomorrow, I believe, so.
Actually, that was pretty interesting. So we met with the President of the Senate, and we were well received, but literally, one of the first things he said is, I understand you're a very wealthy community. And I said that we are a wealthy, no, it's true we are a wealthy community, but I took the occasion to explain to him how Bonita Springs is government light, how we have, receive $8 million, that's all we receive in ad valorem, and what our needs are, what the effect was. So I actually thought it was a good comment he made, because he kind of asked for input, as opposed to just saying, oh, you guys are great and such, and not being upfront. So that is, that concept, I wouldn't overdo it, but it does have a little bit of currency. We did hear it elsewhere as well. And that's where the genesis of that paperwork I did that night is. So any comments anybody has, send them to Arlene. But it basically explains everything we know. Lastly, I am getting together with Chauncey Goss on Friday. We're having breakfast to talk, and I'm sure other council people have met, talked to Chauncey as well, with Thrillies in there. Try to review a little bit of what has been done for us, but perhaps what more can be done. And the approach I'm taking is not dissimilar to, with respect to FDOT and the quadrant plan, which is we need a plan here. So, for example, if you look at Big Cypress, which, as you probably know, is a subsidiary of the Water Management District, you go on their website, they have 5, 10-year plans with respect to flood control. And we don't, we have the work of Jim Beaver, we have the work we're doing ourselves, but we don't have that from the Water Management District. So, my suggestion, I don't know why anybody would disagree with this, is that whether they do it over in Palm Beach, or if they wanted to do it at Big Cypress, which we're not technically part of, either way, it's the South Florida Water Management District, so can they take a lead as the engineering ability they have to give us a long, short, medium, long-term flood control plan as a start? Does that make sense?
Yeah, to start,
Yeah.
They got nothing now.
Yeah. So that's all I had. Peter, I don't know if you can hear, or beyond anything you'd like to say?
No, that's a very good summary, and thanks for going up to Tallahassee, and Fred, thanks for going up to Tallahassee, and a lot of good things in motion, and hopefully I'll be back on my feet soon, team. Thank you.
All right, good, good. Well, you were missed up there. Several people said, where's Peter? So, thank you. Well, good. Anything else from council, staff? We're good? Yeah. Approval of the minutes. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Yeah, second. Roll call.
Councilwoman Caramba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Okay. Public comment? Seeing none, motion to, oh, here he is.
Seeing none.
Yeah.
Hard to mix it.
There's extra seat up here for you, right?
I was going to say, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Jason Mon, Sanibel resident, Sanibel City Councilman. I just showed up to support what Estero had said, former Mayor Betos. I was there at their city council meeting, and I do attend all the city council meetings for the 4 cities in the district. When I was there, they covered a lot of the same things that they talked about here. There was a great deal of support from the citizens, and I've sort of summed it up to myself that zoning and land use laws, and I practice that and litigate them too, they are a safety net against ourselves for the future. And I always point out to Sanibel as probably one of the best examples where you have it zoned by the county for 90,000 people, and we have it for 6,000. And I think any of you who've been out for a nice day on the beach or something on Sanibel can appreciate the difference between what that island is now and what it would have been from 74 forward. I think a decision needs to be made by all leaders in this county about whether we will go forward in history being a tourist economy with family farms on our perimeters that are in effect maintaining the environment out there and doing water management with people who actually live on the land. And I wasn't aware that Cicada had originally commissioned the study, but the Cicada Farm is a fantastic place where they raise hundreds of versions of heirloom plants that don't exist anymore, tomato, corn, etc. And there's some of the stuff that they produce actually goes to the, I believe the seed bank in Iceland, where in cases of disaster there will be there. I mean, they'll have fields of corn, and each ear has got a paper bag on it to protect it from other pollen coming in, and they bring the scientists come in and put in. I believe the University of Michigan does studies there. So it's quite a famous place. And I, for one, I love it because they're kind enough to let me hunt on their land, and my son and I spend every New Year's Day to watch dawn rise over their farm, and then we spent the day hunting. And it's actually in the family, it's called the vegetable hunt because they let us take vegetables. And we usually end up with rubbish bags full of tomatoes more than deer or hogs or anything else. I wanted also to say how terribly proud I was of the city of Bonita Springs universally and unanimously supporting Estero, which I think has taken an important leadership role. And I can at least say for my brothers and sister on the city of Sanibel that at this point, and I was reaching out today, at least 3 of us will be there also to support it. So and I think I brought it up once before, that it's important for all of us to hang together lest we hang apart. And the band that we created out of the cities on the coastal Lee County towns has really been successful and really sends a message. And everything that we have said is exactly what our citizens agree with. Now, they may not have the wherewithal of others out there in the political marketplace, but they are appreciative of what we're doing and what we're trying to protect. And unless there is a justified reason, not just a thin veneer, a veil if you will, for why we should change those rules, we are going to pay for it in the future. I do not want to go down to saying, here son, I have handed you the mining capital of Southwest Florida, enjoy your future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.